Hey, this is Josh Flanagan from iFanboy.com. This is a Talksplode episode, and today we are talking to Jason Fabok. You just told me how to say it, and as I started to, I doubted everything.
You sounded great. That was
All
great.
right. Yeah.
Perfect.
um, so what I know about you is somewhat little. I know that the first time I saw your name was on like a Batman issue, which I was like, that's a pretty good place to start. But we'll go back a little further. I know you're from Canada. So when
Yeah.
did you sort of get into comics?
My break into the industry was in 2010.
Hmm.
I live in a small town in southern Ontario. We're close to the Detroit Windsor border. And a local hero in the comic book community in my area is David Finch.
Mm.
And so around that time, I had finished up I went to college for animation. I was learning
Mm.
illustration. I was interested in drawing ever since I was little, and decided, no, I'm going to try and pursue this as a career. But I didn't really know where to start. And so I knew David Finch was from my area, and a friend of mine knew him and got my portfolio into his hands, and he invited me over to his house, and he started giving me sort of like one-on-one lessons. And I kind of refer to it as like a comic book boot camp. It was like we would, I was going over there a few days a week. He would give me a project to, like, draw buildings, fill this page full of buildings, a whole city, and he'd show me kind of how he'd do perspective grids and all that stuff. And then I'd go home and I would draw, like, if he asked me to do one page, I'd come back with like 4 or 5 pages.
Hmm.
And so I'd do that, and I'd bring it back to him, and he would be very truthful and kind of rip it to shreds, tell me where it was all wrong, but then also show me where I was right, and then help me to make it better. Here's how you can make this better. Here's what I do in this situation. And so that went on for about 6 months, and we learned everything: hands, feet, posing, proportion, everything, right? Storytelling. And then after that 6 months, he was at Marvel at the time. He made his move to DC. And so he was like, hey, let's just put together a portfolio, send it in, and let's see what happens. And I got hired, and jumped right in on Batman stuff.
So that really was the first thing you got hired and published.
It was like a couple issues of Superman Batman in
Yeah.
2010, and then I didn't hear much back from DC. I got a couple little, like, projects, and then so David Finch introduced me to the guys at Aspen Comics, and so I went and worked there for about a year and a half, which was really nice because it was thrown right into DC was crazy, because it was,
Yeah.
like, you have to pump out this work at an insane speed, and I was not used to that, and so I was struggling really bad. And so going over to Aspen, they were pretty much like, hey, you just work at your own pace, like, learn how to draw, learn how to get your quality with their quantity
Hmm.
of work that you got to do. And so I did that for about a year and a half, and then I went back to DC and started working there on what was it, Batman the Dark Knight, and then got on to Detective Comics, and then from there I did Batman stuff for a good, I don't know, 10 years, seems. And it was funny because my goal, like my life goal, career goal, was to work on a Batman book. And that was like the first thing I did. And so it was like, okay, well, now I got to come up with a new goal, you know, but it was awesome. It was a lot of work, a lot of long hours and long nights and all this kind of stuff. But having David Finch there to help me, and having good editors and people that I was surrounded with at DC, really helped me to learn quickly and build my confidence in myself, and I was always open for asking for pointers, like, what can I do better? I would ask my editors for critiques after every issue. And I would just be like, just be honest. And they would. And then I would work on those things to try and get better with each book. And so I was with DC for 12 years, from up to about 2020, 2021 or so, and then 2022, and then now I'm doing the stuff with Ghost Machine. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was quite a start, but it was a
Yeah,
lot of,
that's
you know.
were you a comic book kid? I mean, you said you went for animation and illustration.
Um, I wasn't.
Hmm.
I my dad had a whole bunch of old comic books that I loved to read. There were a lot of X-Men stuff and some old like the Phantom and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I would look through those books a lot, and he would buy me comic books every once in a while, yeah, issue of Batman here and there. But I loved comic book superheroes more from the movies.
Hmm.
So like I remember Batman '89, seeing that. Um, it was on TV probably in like 1990 or something,
Hmm.
1991. I remember I snuck. That was back in the days of the old VHS where you could record stuff off TV. And I remember my parents were gone, and so I asked my cousin who was babysitting us, "Can you record this movie on this VHS tape? Because I need to watch it." And so I watched that movie so many times, and then I loved the old '66 Batman show because that was on reruns a lot. And then there was the animated series, Batman
Yeah.
animated series, as well as the X-Men animated show and the Christopher Reeve Superman movies and stuff. So I watched a lot of that stuff. So I knew a lot about the characters and the books, but I didn't read the comics really. But
So you were kind
strangely
of
enough,
drawn to the idea of superheroes more than
yeah.
yeah.
Strangely enough, though, like I feel like I knew who like Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee and all these guys were, even though I was like they were kind of their artwork was kind of bigger than than the industry was at that time. This is early '90s, and so like the X-Men animated show, everything's based off of Jim Lee's artwork, and so it's like when I finally discovered like Jim Lee's X-Men, I was like, wait a minute, like this looks exactly like the cartoons.
Hmm.
And it was like that those art styles were just there from the beginning. And so I was always attracted to that kind of artwork. But it wasn't until high school I really started getting the comic books. And
Hmm.
and it was mostly because of I had an English teacher, Mr. Werbinski, who used to bring me comic books because he knew I liked to draw. He caught me drawing in class a bunch.
Hmm.
And so he used to bring me comic books at school, and so I would read them, and then he was actually the one who said, you should think about being a comic book artist, and so I started going to the comic book shop, and I would find all these old. I would always go in the back issues because they were cheaper. I didn't have much money. I was a teenager, but I would find old Jim Lee X-Men and X-Force. I was a big Marvel guy. I loved
Yeah.
Marvel stuff more than I loved DC stuff. Um, and then when I remember reading Batman Hush, and that really like kind of sealed the deal. I was like, okay, like this really excites me. This is something I would love to pursue. And so from that moment on, it became kind of, I wanted to pursue a career in comics, but I didn't know how. It seemed impossible.
So when you went to school for animation, was that like the responsible choice, but you really wanted to draw comics?
Yeah, like I kind of, I was always told like don't put your eggs all in one
Yeah.
basket. So I was kind of thinking more like, well, if I could go the animation route, I'll learn illustration, I'll learn life drawing, I'll learn. I loved film. I actually wanted to be more like get into more like filmmaking
Hmm.
and movie directing, and I didn't get into the school that I wanted to get into. And so I kind of started looking at. Somebody had said there's an animation program at our local college. You should check it out. And so I thought that kind of checked a whole bunch of boxes. It was film, it was drawing, it was all this kind of stuff, and I figured I could use all of that skill in something. Maybe I would go off and want to work for Pixar or Disney or whatever. So
Hmm.
I kind of went that route, and it wasn't until about it was a 3-year course. In the second year, I realized I don't really like animating. I like the
Hmm.
storytelling, but
Right.
I want to illustrate. I'd rather draw one really cool image instead of like 150 quickie ones to get that 30 seconds of animation or whatever.
Hmm.
I wanted to draw one cool shot. And so then I started to pursue more looking at comic books. And I even drew my, and I think I wrote and drew my own comic book sometime in there too. I wanted to learn the process of it all and call it from the pencils, inks through the colors. And so I started doing that kind of thing and just kind of worked at it. And then David Finch actually came in and talked to our class when I was in that college course. And that was when I kind of realized, oh man, like I'm from a small town. It's like, you can be from a small town and do this job. You don't have to live in LA, New York. You can do it from Windsor, Ontario. You can, like, Dave worked out of his house in his basement, in his studio. And that's when it kind of clicked. Wait a minute, I could maybe do this. It's possible, but I have to really work at it and learn.
When did you sort of get a sense of, artists as a, because there's one thing to be, I'm reading Batman, and then there's a second where like, oh, I'm reading this person who's drawing Batman, or this person who's writing Batman, and sort of understanding that that's a craft, and you're sort of, oh, there's techniques to this. There's more than just sort of what I'm looking at on paper, like sort of understand it like as not just something that looks cool, but as a craft, as a sort of device to tell that story.
That would have probably come around my time late in high school. I remember my teacher gave me Watchmen to read, and so I read that. Yeah, I was like, but it was pretty heavy, and that was the first time I kind of read a comic book and went, whoa, like this can be way more than just simply pow bam, cool artwork, images. That book was all 9-panel grids, and it was like you could see the camera zooming in and zooming out on things, and that's when it started to click with me. And so I started hunting down artists. Jim Lee was like the first one. Then when learning about David Finch being from my area, it was like
Did you know who he was when he came to your school?
Yes, when he came to my school, I knew who he was, but I kind of learned about him through collecting issues of Ultimate X-Men. He was on Ultimate X-Men, and that book I kind of discovered. This would have been in like around the time of like the first X-Men movie. When that came out, they launched the Ultimate X-Men stuff, and like Kubert, Adam Kubert was drawing it. So I was collecting all of those Ultimate X-Men. Like I was just like in, and then Finch took over at some point too in there. So I started collecting all those issues, and then that's when I started going like, wow, I really like this guy's art. I really like this guy's art. And I started to kind of find these artists. But it's funny, like there were certain artists that I love now that at that time I was kind of like put off by, or just didn't click with me until I, like you said, you start to kind of learn that there's a process and a craft and a style that these different artists have. And so then you start going outside of your comfort zone of the artists that really click with you. You start looking at other people, like Mike Mignola's one, where it's like, at first it was very simple and cartoony, and I'm like, no, I want the super detailed stuff. But then once I started looking at his work, you're just like, wow, like this is incredible stuff. Yeah, it seems simple, but really it's not. There's a lot to it, the way that the compositions, the way his page layouts are, the way he tells a story. And I got enveloped in that, and then loved his work. Frank Quitely was another one like that, where at first I was kind of like, I don't know. But then I started reading his stuff and just like fell in love with it, and his storytelling and the way that his composition and his panels are different than anybody than like my Mignola or Finch or anybody. It's like I started to find these different guys that I wanted to pull from and find something and bring that influence into my artwork and what I was doing. So, it was kind of around that time. And then when I started learning from Finch, he really started to say, no, you got to look at this guy. You got to look at this guy and bring some of that into your artwork, because that's going to make it alive. And so he was kind of expanding my view on art, the artists that aren't doing comics.
When we've been doing this website since before I knew a damn thing, and like at a certain point, like I had my favorites. Like the first artist who I ever like went, whoa, and then sort of recognized that was probably McFarlane Amazing Spider-Man. Then I was like, well, that's something I never, so you like, that's when you click with an artist. But for years, like, I'd see Jack Kirby and I'd be like, I don't know, I don't get it. And then when it did, I was like, oh, he's like the best thing that's ever happened. Or
Yeah.
Mignola's another one that was certainly like that. The other one would be like Sienkiewicz. And I was, I was
Mhm.
like 12 the first time I saw Bill Sienkiewicz, and I was like, I don't get it. That's ugly. And
Yeah.
now, like, you can see his brushwork from a million miles away. If he inks anybody, it's just like
Hmm.
there's nothing like that. I love that feeling. That's one of my favorite parts still about reading comics
Yeah.
is you see those sort of flavors that those different people have. So, you're looking at comics, you're taking it seriously. Um, and then, so at the time that you sort of reached out to David Finch, like how far along would you say you were in sort of understanding the craft? Like obviously you could draw, you could probably do pinups, but it sounds like he took you through a lot of stuff. And by the way, that amount of time that he gave you sounds incredible. You need to send him a Christmas card every year.
Yeah. Well, Dave's still my hero.
Sure.
I still, we're friends and we talk here and there. We don't see each other as much as we probably would like to. We're both busy with family and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But, um, you know, Dave really did, like, he didn't need to do what he did. He could have
Hmm.
just looked at my portfolio for 10 minutes and then moved aside or just giving me a couple point. Really, I was just looking for like a couple pointers. But it's funny, like looking back at a lot of that stuff, I was actually more artistically attracted to things that were more cartoony and simplistic. Like
Hmm.
I liked like J. Scott Campbell, which is more stylized. It's not simplistic, but it's more stylized.
Yeah.
Uh, I was kind of more naturally drawn towards that kind of thing. But then Dave, he seeing how learn like Dave kind of taught me how to draw like him, kind
Mm.
of his mindset and how he builds a character and how he like lays the foundation down for his like a pose and anatomy and all this sort of thing and shapes and forms. And so I started to really kind of like uh, I was drawing much more like him. And he often he would often say things like, well, you would have found your way into it without me. But I don't know. There was a huge jump between that time when he started looking at my work versus I was actually just thinking I have the box. I have the box. I'm gonna go grab it 1 minute somewhere. But I had this box where it had all of the stuff that Dave was teaching me and literally my sketches, like my rough. Get my focus back here. I don't know why it's there.
They do that. I don't know why.
It had all my roughs and all of this like stuff that I was learning from him. I found it the other day. I don't know where I put it. I might be in my storage room, but you could see a huge jump. Like when somebody really knows what they're doing and they're able to pinpoint like you're doing this wrong and they're not afraid to tell you you're doing this wrong. You're drawing this muscle wrong. You're connecting these two muscles together. That's not the right way to doing it. This is how you do it.
Mhm.
And when somebody can point that out and all of a sudden it clicks in your head as an artist, you go, oh, then when you start doing those little things and fixing those little things, all of a sudden your artwork takes a leap. And it's that's kind of the way that it used to work. Is you would go and work in a studio with a bunch of guys
Mhm.
and in a bullpen, and they would teach you like Finch when he started in the industry. He moved to LA and he worked at Top Cow, like next to like in front of Mark Silvestri, and he worked next to like Travis Charest and Michael Turner. Like these guys were all there. And so there was a lot of competition and they were all jamming on each other. Like they were learning from each other. Right. And then Mark Silvestri's walking around and he's going, no, you got to do it like this, or try this, or, hey, try this kind of rendering or whatever. And so it spurred a lot of those guys on, and a lot of those guys became big superstars within comics. But then the internet kind of happened, and all of those bullpens and those like studios, they all kind of passed, like they died. Some of them still existed, but it was what I was kind of learning from Dave was kind of that one-on-one experience that he had from Mark Silvestri. And so it's something that he took a lot of time out of his day. I would show up and he's like working on pages, and then he's got to like teach this young guy, you know, how to draw. But he had a lot of patience for me, and I think I wanted it. I wanted it really bad. So if he asked me to draw one page of heads, I would come back with 4 or 5 pages. I wanted to show him I want this chance, because I knew he had trained other guys who got in and, you know, got a chance. But I wanted to show him I wanted it more than anybody, and that I was willing to put the time, effort into this, and I was willing to take the criticism and willing to get better. And so I think that he saw that in me, and so he put the extra time in as well.
So did you consciously like try to have a thick skin about it, or is that just like you want to get better, so you're the kind of person who can sort of take it?
I consciously, I knew I had to have a thick skin. You have to. And Dave used to warn me too. He used to say, like, don't ever look at like reviews of your work. Don't ever look up your name and see what people are saying, because he's like, they will shred. He's like, the internet, you know, they'll say you're the worst artist ever, but then your sales numbers come back and they're huge, and you're thinking like, well, the 2 things don't line up. But maybe I was dumb, but I started looking at a lot of that stuff. I looked at reviews, and a lot of them in those early things were bad. Like, they were ripping me apart and saying, oh, he's a Finch clone and all this stuff. And Dave used to warn me about that. He says, you're going to draw like me, because I taught you how to draw like me. It's going to take you a good 4 or 5 years to find your own thing. And he's like, but you will. He's like, when he started, he was a Silvestri clone, and it took him 4 or 5 years to find that David Finch style. And he's like, you'll do the same thing, because you'll bring in all these influences from other artists, and they will start to form your art. And I also found that by reading some of those reviews, they would say nice things, but then they might pick apart faces or expressions. And so then I consciously would go, okay, I need to work on my faces. So who's an artist that has really great faces? And it was like Gary Frank was somebody who I loved the way he drew expression. And so I started looking at that. And then, and then it was like anatomy. I started looking like at Yvonne Reyes and his stuff on Blackest Night, and like started pulling a little bit from that. And so that started to change and inform the way my art was. And again, I was always asking the editors what I could do to get better, and it helped me get better, and it helped me get more jobs. It helped me get the next job, the next job, the next job. And my work ethic, I think, really helped to propel me over my talent at that time and get me better jobs.
Was there like, you go in there and you're meeting with Dave all the time. Was there like a place where like it sort of clicked for you, or like a place where you made a leap into some sort of comic book technique that you hadn't thought of, or like really understanding storytelling or something like that? Because like for me as a reader, as a person who's had to talk about these all the time, when somebody finally got the idea of storytelling into my head and how sort of the pacing of those panels, that's when I started to really recognize who I thought. I was like, oh, Stuart Immonen is the best guy in the world at this storytelling, things like that. And that's when I really started to appreciate it, you know, as a reader and as a person who talks about it and thinks about it all the time. Is there sort of a technique or a point that was, you know, like opening the camera for you?
I felt like my storytelling was something that was always strong right from the beginning, but mostly because I studied a lot of film, like because I wanted to be in film. So I always had the ability in my head to envision things, and I could kind of see it. And even to this day, like I just go with my gut feeling a lot of times. I don't like sit there and do layouts of every page. I just like read the script, and the first thing that kind of pops in my head is what I go with. I remember, though, I do remember like as I was working through a lot of the Detective Comics stuff, more and more, I started to take a little bit more chance. Because again, like it was this wrestling match between, I have to pump out 20 pages a month.
Yeah.
And so you don't have much, like sometimes you got to cut corners, and you just got to be like, I just got to draw a bunch of close-ups of faces to get this page out of the way and move on, instead of being an artist and try to do something interesting and cool. That came as once my speed caught up. my speed caught up with the quality, then I could really start to like think about, okay, I want to tell this story. I'm going to use silhouettes here, and I'm going to do this and that. And I'm going to pull back, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on a panel that should just be something quick to get it. It's like there's not, but it's an establishing shot. It could really establish this page, and that kind of came through that Batman stuff, the Detective Comics stuff, into Batman Eternal, and then Justice League. When I started working with Geoff Johns, that was like I felt like I was getting like scripts that were just so solid from the visual side of things. I didn't have to. It took a lot of the guesswork out of it, and so I could just like draw what he was telling me to draw, and it always worked. But that was a lot of rush stuff too. It was
Do you prefer like a more detailed script?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, because it's just like it when you're trying to blast out 20 pages and it's like I got to do a page in a day. Like I like to just read the script and it tells me, long shot, medium shot, close up, blah blah blah, and it's just like boom 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 boom, and you just go with it, and it helps you get through that day and move on, because it's always I got to get through this page, go to the next one, got to get through this page, go to the next one, and it wasn't until like actually like later, like with like 3 Jokers towards the end of my DC run there, like where I actually had time to sit there and spend 2-3 days on a page and really figure it out. And so, but that came with I had to earn that, I guess. I had to earn it over time, working on the things that I worked on.
What's something that now that you use all the time that you really wish you knew early on when you sort of first got those DC jobs?
Oh man, I don't know. I wish I had more confidence in myself, but that's something you have to kind of build towards just by doing the job.
I think that's any of us growing up.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of like, I wish I had that. I wish I just had that kind of like, now I don't know. I just don't even think about it. I just kind of like I said, I just trust my gut and I go with it. And I think in those early times, it was a lot of give and take. Like you had to just kind of throw whatever you could down on that page to get it done and move on. Whereas now I can actually think through it, and I can have more confidence to play with composition and all this kind of stuff. I wish I would have worked actually during that time. I wish I would have actually kept working on the kind of the bare fundamentals and kept building like life drawing and all this kind of stuff. But it was just, everything was so busy that you drew, and then at the end of the day, you were so exhausted. You didn't want to draw anymore. You just want to go do something else. But yeah, I'm not really, that's a tough one, because I really have to reflect on that. I feel like I use still a lot of the same techniques and the same things that Dave taught me even back then, because they were just so fundamental to comic book drawing. And I played around with all kinds of different mediums, whether it be pencil, paper, digital, all this kind of stuff. So I've kind of messed around with all of that. But yeah, I'm not really sure. I think, yeah.
How do you work now? Like when you're doing Rook? Are you
mostly digital now?
Yeah.
And for a few reasons, I switched to digital actually pretty early on in my career, even with DC. And it's because I started to get really bad hand cramps from drawing on paper. And I think it's because I just pressed really hard, and it just, like, my body was just always so sore. And then switching over to digital, all of a sudden I could like make the sensitivity so low I could barely have to touch the screen and I could draw. And it also, it was faster. I was able to get done a lot. I still do kind of a mix of the two. I'll do, if I know it's a page that's like a big splash page or a cover, I do those traditionally on paper still, and I ink them. But most of the other pages are just digital, and it helps me get my work done quick, and I can get it to where I really am happy with it. And I'm kind of a control freak, so having that ability to control every little thing and go back and noodle with it, like, right before you hand it over to the colorist, was really nice. So yeah, kind of a mix of the two, but more digital than traditional.
So talk to me about when you start doing professional work. You're working with writers for the first time. what was that like at first? I'd love to hear if like what you learned from different writers, you know, or what you wish you hadn't done. You don't have to name names or anything like that, but it's interesting to see how those guys shape your career because, you know, David Finch came in a lot from the art side, but now you're working with people's scripts and stuff, so that had to be an adjustment.
Yeah. You know, the first, you know, the first books I did were kind of like fill-in stuff, so I didn't really talk too much with the writers. Then when I did Detective Comics, I was with John Layman, and so we
Mm.
talked here and there about the work. I right from the beginning, I wanted to be part of the writing process,
Mhm.
and I wanted to give my 2 cents. But I found maybe again, maybe it's because I was a new guy in the industry. It was pretty much just, you know, just draw what
Mhm.
you're told to draw and
Mhm.
don't really, you know. And I wanted to have more input on colorists and how my work would look, and it was just kind of like, no, just do your thing and let editors let us kind of handle the rest. And it wasn't how I wanted to work. I wish I could have had more influence on that, the Detective Comics stuff, and kind of give my 2 cents, because again, I was really influenced by the Batman '89 stuff and the Batman animated series, and I wanted to kind of do more of that. This was in the New 52 era, so there was also a lot of like, you know, oh well, you know, Scott Snyder and them are doing this, so you guys can only do this, this, and this.
Mhm.
So there were barriers kind of to what we were doing. Um,
And that was like
the,
Layman's sort of big mainstream moment after sort of Choose success too. So he was
yeah,
probably pretty holding on to it, what he wanted it to be.
yeah,
And
I enjoyed working with John
yeah.
Layman. I did. I had a lot of fun, and I pumped out a lot of work too. I don't know if I was his preferred artist, but DC gave me a chance. Mike Marks was the editor, and he gave me a chance, and that really kind of built up my career fast. Um, and then I worked with Scott Snyder and James Tynion on the Batman Eternal stuff, and that was fun. But again, I didn't have much say because they were working so far ahead. It was a weekly book,
Mhm.
so excuse me. They were working so far ahead that they couldn't change anything. It was pretty much, here's
Right.
your script, you just draw it. It wasn't until really clicking with Geoff Johns that I realized the power of collaboration.
Mhm.
Because, excuse me for a second, I gotta get a drink.
No problem.
My throat's been sore. Um, Geoff was somebody who wants to collaborate. So
Mhm.
it was so different. Whereas the other writers, I barely talked to them. Geoff's calling me at like midnight, excited about some idea and wants to talk to me about it. And I'm trying to sleep. On a 4 hours difference. He's in LA and I'm out on the East Coast. So, you know, but that was the difference. He was like, he wanted to talk story. He wanted to talk about ideas and all that sort of stuff. And so, um, that really changed the way that that really changed the way that I approach story. And sorry, excuse me, I got like a bug in my throat.
I'm making you talk constantly.
But yeah, he really showed me the power of collaboration.
Mhm.
Um, and he showed me that when you collaborate with somebody, especially as a writer collaborating with an artist, um, the artist, he starts to buy into the story that much more. He connects with it because my ideas are being slipped in or used here and there. And so you, as the artist, are that much more emotionally involved in the story. And that just made a huge difference to me. And it really changed the way that I started drawing. I wanted to do my best instead of just rushing through it. And so, like, that was a major turning point, was learning about that, how to collaborate with somebody and feeling that respect
Mhm.
that Geoff has for his artists, and so that relationship started to build there from a working standpoint and a friendship as well. But yeah, that changed the game for me, was learning about collaboration.
It's really interesting because I find that sometimes, like I like Geoff is a phenomenon. He's this sort of one person I think who for years really understood, especially at DC, doing superhero comics in a way that just worked. And it wasn't about being super fancy. It was just sort of understanding it. And his books had a feeling. And to hear you say that, like, oh, that's the way that he collabed, like I was like, oh, that makes sense. So he has that relationship that he had with, Scott Collins along the way, or with Gary Frank, or with all the guys at the new studio. Um, and he does, like, I've knew him a while back. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but he's infectiously enthusiastic. It's kind of, and not in an annoying way, which is key.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting that sort of changed things for you. I'm about to get to sort of moving over to Ghost Machine and working with him. But at that point, you're at DC for a really long time. Did you feel like maybe were you starting to feel like maybe I want to be doing something else? I've been doing this same thing over and over for a long time. Like, where did you see yourself wanting to go before that came up? Like, what did you think then what's the next part of my career is going to be?
Yeah, like when we were working on Justice League, I kind of had a change of my thought process as well, because I kind of burnt out. I was doing so much, I had to pump through the work so quick and so fast. And uh, my wife and I had our first child. And so that really changed my perspective on how much time am I putting into this stuff and versus my family life. And so after we had finished Justice League Dark Side War, I kind of said to Geoff, like, I don't know if I want to do the monthly kind of grind anymore. I want to work on things that are I can spend a little more time on, and have that family time, but also create something uh, that's really good and that's going to be high quality. And so I got Geoff was kind of working on movie stuff at the time, so I got some opportunities to do some other little things. Like I did the Swamp Thing story with Tom King.
Mm.
That was like a one-shot story, and that was a lot of fun. And I got to kind of, I did this Batman button thing where it was like the Watchmen crossover.
Right.
And so it's like I got to do some fun stuff like that. And then we did 3 Jokers, and that was kind of like, I saw that as like the pinnacle in a way. It's like, okay, I'm going to do a Batman Joker story. It was a story that Geoff and I had talked about for a long time,
Mm.
but just weren't able to kind of figure out when to do it. And then we finally got around to do it. And I spent about 2 years drawing that. And that was a lot of work. It was a lot of fun. But it was during that time we were working on that when I kind of started to think to myself, like, okay, like what's my next goal? Like I had set all these like career goals for myself, and I had accomplished them. I had done Justice League, which you get to work on all the characters, and then I had done a Swamp Thing story. I always wanted to draw a Swamp Thing story, and so I got to do that. And then I did a Batman Joker thing with that was a very high selling book. It sold a lot of copies, and it's kind of like an evergreen now. It sells very well even now. The trade sells great all the time. And so I kind of said to myself, like, okay, what's going to be my legacy? What am I going to leave behind? Like, what is it that I really started to get convicted also about this fact that, like, all of these things are ideas and characters that have been around for 80 years, going on 100 years with some of these guys, Superman and Batman and all this kind of stuff. And even with the Marvel stuff, Spider-Man, all these characters have been around forever. And it's like, I started thinking, like, is this what we're supposed to do? Or are we just supposed to just keep doing the same character stuff over and over and over and over and over again?
Mm.
And the upside of that is you can make a good living, and you kind of can have a legacy on those historic characters. And it's an honor to work on Batman. It's an honor to draw Superman. Like, I loved it. that was like my childhood dream, right? But then I started looking at other creators, and like going back to Mike Mignola, I was looking at Mike, and I was like, this guy created, like, he left DC and he created his own character that he owns, and he can control, and he gets to control the lore and the story for this character. And they've made movies on this character, Hellboy, and and he could do this forever. Like, he can keep building this character. And then I looked at Todd McFarlane with Spawn, and it's like same thing. At that point, he was going on like 350 issues of Spawn. It's like 350 issues. Like, wow, like that's crazy. And so I started, my goal started to change from, I want to be the top guy at DC Comics and work on all the big stuff at DC. My view started to change to, I want to create new things. I want to create something brand new for the next generation of comic book readers. And actually, funnily enough, like one of the things that spurred me on was, as I was working on Three Jokers, I went to a convention, and Rob Liefeld came out of nowhere and grabbed me and said, "Hey," he said, "Yeah, I love your work, Jay." And then he said to me something along the lines of, you have to create your own thing. You have to build legacy outside of DC Marvel, create your own book with your own characters. And I said, well, I'm doing this Batman thing right now. It's going to be big. And he said, that's great. After you're done Batman, go do your own thing. So that kind of started to get that in my head. And then Geoff and I were talking about, what do we want to do after Three Jokers? And he was working on the Geiger stuff. So he had already kind of dipped his toe in independent stuff. And so I just said, I want to do something new. Let's do something new. Because we debated going over and doing Spider-Man or X-Men over at Marvel. And that would have been a lot of fun. And it would have, we could have gotten some decent money from that. But I wanted to take more of a chance and create something from scratch and go on that adventure. And so we started to really talk about it seriously at that point and started to build something.
So you start talking to Geoff about this story. So, and it's, he's got this whole universe of stuff going on at Ghost Machine. Was that the plan to like have a whole line of comics, or did that sort of grow because, you had a thing you were going to do with him and all these other artists and ideas? I mean, Rook seems separate from the other ones. I don't think it's connected to the other books.
No. Yeah. What had happened was we were discussing doing our own thing. And at that time, his kind of side company was, what was it called? Mad Ghost. It was called Mad Ghost. And so he did Geiger and he did Junkyard Joe with Gary Frank. And then he started talking with Brian Hitch about doing a book, and we were talking together. And then one day he called me up and said, hey, I'm thinking, why don't we just create our own company and figure this out and kind of build this company around these books that we're doing, and see if we can start bringing in some other top talent in comics to build this out, where we as a collective kind of all own the company and own what we're producing. And he said it's something like that's never really been done before. So we kind of looked at Image Comics and how they were founded and the things that they did that were good and the things that they did that didn't work. And so we sort of like started to talk to a lot of business people and tried. It took us a long time to kind of figure out the company side of things. And at the same time, we were starting to work on these books. And Rook was one of those ideas. There was a couple ideas that Geoff had thrown out at me. But I had all these drawings. I had been doing designs and drawings of this Rook character for years. It goes back to even early, some of the older ones I have are like 2012 and stuff like that, but it goes back even further. And I had this character with a bird mask and a cowboy trench coat kind of thing. And I had other characters, side characters. They didn't have any masks or anything like that. And they were just, I didn't really know what the story was going to be or who this guy was. I just kind of saw him as like this space vigilante kind of guy. And I kept on showing Geoff, and he was very intrigued by the designs. He was like, this is something cool, but he's like, what's this all about? And so things really clicked when he asked me about the helmet. He's like, well, how come he's got a bird mask? And my thought was just, well, he's like Batman is a Batman. This guy's a Birdman, like he's an animal. And it's like, that's kind of like it's a classic comic trope of naming your superhero after an animal,
Mm-hmm.
And I always loved crows. I love crows and birds and blackbirds. I've been attracted to like that kind of a bird. That's like, I've always loved them. And so I just said, well, he's got a cool mask because he's a bird guy, but I don't. And then Geoff said, well, what if he can control and communicate with birds through this helmet? And that was like a big moment. We both like looked at each other and went, wait a minute. So there could be other characters in this universe that also use helmets to control animals. And so we just started riffing, and we came up with a list of like 20 different characters and their names. And that really was the spark and then he went away. I think that night he's like, I got to come up with an idea for the setting. And so he came back the next day and was like, they're on a dying world. And these characters are kind of like survivors on this planet. And they were, he just came up with the whole thing, the whole premise. And I was just like, this is awesome. This is exactly what I want to do. And it just felt like one of those ideas that you've been searching for forever. And it finally just happened. And it's like, this has a lot of potential, and we can really go somewhere big with this.
What was it like taking that step, going from, steady, work with the company to being like, I'm on my own, I'm doing this thing. And listen, if you're going to, being hooked up with Geoff Johns is a really good way to go about it. But I think even I was surprised, like sort of how many things there were, and God, how regular it's all been. It's been a really impressive sort of launch and continuation for sure. But like, what did that feel like at the time? Like you were stepping off the side of a boat?
Yeah, it was a little scary.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my wife and I had been talking about like the plan to eventually do something like this anyway, to do a creator-owned book, even if it wasn't with Geoff, if I wrote and drew something. And so we were always kind of saving up that money for that time. Like, okay, if I leave DC, I can have enough money to survive on while I work on this. But at the same time, I had a lot of confidence because, like, again, you said, like, working with Geoff Johns, I had a lot of confidence. I knew the books would do well, and I knew that we had a good idea. But I also, one thing that Geoff and I discussed a lot of was how we had seen other creators leave DC Marvel, and they go off to Image and they do a book and they put out 4, 5, 6 issues, and they realize the sales numbers and the money isn't the same as when they were working on Batman. And so then they give up on their idea and they go back to DC. And I don't blame them for doing that because, you're trying to, pay off your mortgage and you got kids and all this kind of stuff. So we made some different moves as a company to make sure that we had some safety net and things like that. And we were very wise with the way we built our company. But I kind of said, I don't really care what the sales are going to be on this book. I'm in it for the long haul. And it was because of conversations we had with people like Robert Kirkman and Todd McFarlane, who said, look, you gotta stick it out. You have to stick it out. And they said there's a couple different milestones you have to hit. And if you can hit those milestones, it means that you have a certain amount of trades of your collected work being circulated constantly. And those trades will start to bring in money for you as a company. And those trades will also, as you build more and more of those, you'll also start to, other media will start to take notice of this stuff. And if you can start to take your idea and bring that into other media, you will never look back at DC or Marvel, but it takes a while to get to those points. And I think Todd said something like the first 8 or 9 issues are the hardest number to get to, because it's like you're fighting that going back. You're like, maybe I should just go back, but then once you hit 8 or 9, all of a sudden you start to realize that like you have an audience and it's consistently buying the book. And you also know what your numbers are consistently every month. And so that was one of those things. And so again, for me, I knew I've always seen Rook as something that is like, I believe it'll really kind of hit in year 4, year 5, when we have 3, 4 trades out and people really start to see this grand kind of epic tale really starting to take form. It's hard to get that. Like, we have this big idea, like we know where it's all going, and we have milestones in our storyline that we want to get to that are really cool. But it's like, you got to slowly build that out, and you got to build out these characters and these story arcs. They each build upon one another. And you can't do this kind of thing if you're just going to do 6 issues and then leave. Like, you have to put the time into it. And so again, it was scary at first, but now it's paying off. The sales have been great, and people are purchasing the books and they're supporting the company. And we're starting to find that audience, and we can now predict how many issues we're going to sell of each book. And it's starting to take shape and form. And that's the exciting thing, is now we're starting to see like, oh, okay, we can now, that because we own all this stuff and we have creative control over all of it, there's a lot of power in that, and there's a lot of freedom in that. And yeah, like you kind of take some financial risks and whatnot at first, but you can kind of see the road and where it's going and where it's going to pay off in the end. And a lot of it is just about that creative freedom, and that freedom to make your own call and make your own choices and do what you really want to do as an artist. And once you kind of find that, you don't really want to go back to anything else.
How has it been different for you, sort of living outside of that, that DC system that's been your career the whole time? Like, were any sort of challenges or differences that, that sort of like you weren't expecting along the way, or just, with that much freedom, sometimes that's harder. You've got to come up with all of the answers, things like that.
Oh,
How's life different?
From the creative side of things, it's different in the sense that I have to come up with all these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Geoff can write like a 1-paragraph explanation of something, but then I got to think like, well, what does that look like within my universe? What is that character going to look like? What is that town, that city going to look like? What does a spaceship look like? And you start to kind of fiddle with that. And so that takes a long time. Sometimes it takes time to find the design of something. Sometimes it takes me a week. And so like the books aren't moving like I'm not drawing them as quickly as I could at DC, but I also don't want to draw them as quickly as I do.
Right. Yeah.
DC. And so there's the creative angle of that, but I'm actually from like a business angle of it. I'm learning all of this other stuff about comic book creation and about the business of comic books, and what's a wise decision and what's a foolish decision. And we tried this and it didn't work. Let's pivot to this. And all that stuff is going on behind the scenes, and nobody really sees it, but I'm getting an education in that, and I'm learning how like Jeff's done all that. Like he was pretty high up there at DC and at Warner's, and so he's learned all of these things, and so now he's imparting a lot of that. And we have a lot of discussions in Zoom meetings to go through these decisions and these things that we're doing to make our company better and stronger. So that's different. I'm seeing a whole nother angle of the comic book business, and I'm learning about other things too, other business kind of deals that you can make when you have control of your your properties. You can make business deals with other partners.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm learning about that and how to pursue that and how to make good decisions when it comes to that as well. Um, uh, there's a constant pull though, because you see, you kind of like, Batman, if you're on, especially if you're on a Batman book, you're in the limelight
Yeah.
and you're a superstar, you're a rock star, right? And so it's like part of you is kind of always sitting there thinking like, well, I could be drawing that and I could
Mm-hmm.
be getting all the praise and I turned down a lot of stuff at DC towards the end that if I took would have been big, but I just felt like that wasn't the right choice. I feel like this and creating my own thing again, it's a low, slow burn, but if and when it kind of all clicks and takes off, it's going to I don't know, it's just going to be a better future for me and my family, for my kids, for myself creatively, and all of that stuff is kind of different. So you're battling, because again, Dave Finch and I used to have a lot of conversations about this, because there's that kind of like that competitiveness that you have where you want to be on the number one selling book.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're at DC, you're like, it's kind of like everybody for themselves. Like you're sitting there going like, no, I want that project because I want the number one selling, but like I want to outsell that guy. And there's a bit of like that. There's a lot of competition and a lot of kind of like things that are going on behind the scenes that people don't really see, where guys are trying to pull down other people. And like, I don't know, I never liked that part of the business. I just kind of wanted to be left alone and just draw and just do the best I can. And with Ghost Machine, it's like, I'm not like Brian Hitch, Gary Frank, Francis Manpool. They're not my competition. They're
Mm-hmm.
partners with me now. And I'm proud of their books. And I get just as jacked up to read Geiger as I do, Rockefellers. And I'm proud when I read those books. And I'm proud to like say to people, check this book out. It's
Mm-hmm.
really good. And it's a totally different vibe. It's again, for me, it's freeing. It's what I've wanted and what I've sought after in the mainstream, but never really seemed to find. And so I'm finding that here now with Ghost Machine. And I don't know, it's a totally different, I wish more creators could actually feel and get this sense that we have as a creative team. Like a lot of people we approached a lot of different artists and people and writers to come and join us, especially when we were first discussing all this. And a lot of them just couldn't take the chance. They couldn't see, they didn't want to take that risk and that chance. And I understand that. It's tough to leave the big spotlight of the big two, but the hope, if all goes well and all goes according to our plan, we could have we're building legacy with these characters, and some of these characters could potentially even outlive us one day. I don't know. We'll see. But it's a lot of fun having that creative control and control over your future and your destiny, in a different way than DC and Marvel.
Talk to me a little bit about shift gears a little bit, as you're drawing Gotham City primarily for most of your career, and now you're on a lush forested planet that's kind of a sci-fi thing, and it's a whole different deal. Do you feel like that's like more your thing, or is that like, have you been wanting to draw that kind of thing, or has that been liberating? Because you can kind of do anything you want, really. What's it like making sort of that change from everything, just rainy buildings to animals?
Yeah, it's interesting because Rook is probably the last thing I would naturally
Okay, that was the
drawn towards. Like drawing Gotham buildings, and that is, to me, was easy. It was like I knew exactly what everything needed to look like, and there's little tricks you can pull, shadows and all this kind of stuff to really make it like to get through different panels and different things. And I felt like I knew Batman like the back of my hand. Like I could just, I just knew what to draw. I often bring up this illustration of like when Geoff wrote something in he wrote like, we see the Gotham aquarium. It's like, well, I'm sure at some point there was a Gotham aquarium that appeared in a comic. I could always go and look that up. But even if I don't look it up, I kind of know what it looks like because I've seen so much Batman stuff. I can just kind of make something and I can make it look like it's from Gotham City.
Didn't Neil Adams do a thing like in the 70s where there was Batman was with a shark and like that does exist?
Yes, it does. I remember reading that book when I was researching all this stuff. But then, so it's like I knew what all that looked like and again, with Rook, I'm doing the total opposite. Even the way that the characters are designed, it's like when you're working at DC, you're pretty much drawing Batman and Superman. It's pretty much just a naked anatomy of a human. And then you slap on some lines and now they've got a costume. You put a belt on, you change the mask, and you can pump that stuff up pretty quick. You can draw those characters fast. Now working on like Rook specifically, I got characters in like army pants and jackets and these metal masks and machine guns and backpacks and boots, army boots and all this kind of stuff. And I'm drawing wolves 1 minute, and then I'm drawing a turtle, and then I'm drawing a bear and birds and like you said, forests. Forests are not. I find forests hard to draw. A lot of guys love them because they're organic and you can't really screw it up. I find
as a Canadian, can you say that?
Well, yeah. I find them tough, and so like drawing a bunch of square buildings is quick and easy, but drawing a bunch of trees, you have to, the way that you draw them and the way that you make the trunks move and stuff can really say a lot. So it's been a bit of a grind and a bit of a trial and error period. And nothing I'm doing is easy. I'm not making life easy for myself either, because my whole goal was to like draw something that like really go for it and make it super detailed, and every costume is different and unique, and I got to get all those little details in on every drawing and really make something that's special and that feels like it's lived in and has a reason for being there, and could almost feel like a movie on a page. And so I did the opposite of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to design characters that are very easy to draw so that you can draw them over and over and over again. It's like, no, let me draw the most complicated things ever. And some days I kick myself for that. Like my wife hears me complain all the time, and just how exhausted I am at the end of the day after drawing this stuff, and how frustrated I can get sometimes. And I'm like, why did I choose to draw that character like that or add that detail? I hate it. But the fun thing is that like once you get through the book and you see it all colored and it comes to life, you're like, okay, it looks pretty cool. And the other thing too is I also realized it's like, well, wait a minute, if I don't like drawing that item or that piece of equipment or whatever, just get rid of it and change it up. I'm the creator. I can do what I want. Like I can draw these characters how I want. We can make up a reason for things changing, or just, as time goes by, the costumes can evolve and change. And so, there's two different worlds. This is not a superhero comic, even though it has a lot of kind of superhero-y little elements to it, but it's more of a, an action adventure. Star Wars meets Mad Max. And so that's where I'm drawing my inspiration from. And I'm learning how to do that. And I'm learning to get quicker at it too. And it's becoming more secondhand, but at first it was different.
Right. What's the part of, and we'll get this wrapped up, but sort of what is the part of the process that you, even I think I understand from the creativity standpoint, but like from a drawing standpoint, like what's been the most fun about doing this other kind of book, this other style of world? Like what gets you excited about it?
This is that project that I've been always searching for. Like I've always been kind of sitting there going like, I really want to create something new and unique and something that nobody else has ever done before. And that's hard to come up with that kind of idea. And I really feel like we've found it. You know, it's unique. You got these characters. It's a unique take on sci-fi because it's like it's the mixture of technology and nature. You know, it's not taking place in a Blade Runner city and all this kind of stuff. It's taking place in, like you said, forests and valleys and nature, you know, and so that's unique and it's different. It's a lot of fun to see your creation come to life. I will say that. Like when Brad Anderson, my colorist, sends me back a colored page of a character. Like I remember when he sent back those first like Rook like splash pages and stuff, and I almost like just sat there in disbelief, and it was like, this is a character, like I mentioned before, I've been thinking of since I was like 17, 18 years old, and it's fine. It came to life. It's real. You know, it's on the page. It's going to be published, you know, and that's just, it's so, that gets you fired up. So all of the days that I'm stressed out, and I get stressed out because I want the work to be the best it can be.
Since you really give a shit. So that's,
yeah, like I care. I really care. I want it to be the best it can be. I want it to be something that's going to stand the test of time. And I also believe that the readers deserve comic books that are like stellar. Like I wanted, like when somebody's going to pay $4.99 or $3.99 for a comic book, like I want them to want to read that thing 2-3 times and look at the art and just like I like when I pick up a book, that's what I want to do. I want to get engulfed in this thing, and I want to go back and reread it, or even just look at the art again and go, wow, like this was incredible. Like look at all the things that artist put in there, and I want that from the books that I'm doing. And so even though there's a lot of that stress, at the same time, when the issue comes out and you get a great reaction from readers, especially now with social media, people can voice their opinion so easy. And, you know, all of the positive stuff is really makes you realize, okay, I'm on the right path here. Like this is the right direction. This is where I need to go. And I can see the fan base is growing for this work, and there was kind of like a big gap between issue 6 and 7. And I heard about it for a year. As I've been working on this stuff.
Was that planned?
Yeah, like Rook was never meant to be a monthly book. It was always more modeled kind of more, again, like Hellboy. Mike Mignola would just put out the books when he had books, and then he would do like an arc, and then he would do another arc. And I mean, he was a little quicker, I think, than I am, but there was gaps in between, and then you come up with more. It was never monthly. Sure. And that was always the plan with us. It's almost like TV seasons. It's like 6 issues. That's pretty much all I can do in a year. I'm balancing family. I'm balancing all kinds of other stuff. And so it's like going to do 6 issues, and there's going to be delays between issues. There just will, because things pop up. Family stuff happens. Business stuff happens. There's really cool opportunities happening that we can't talk about, but it's like that takes you away, and you kind of have to deal with do those things, and they're exciting things, and then you come back to the work. But again, that's why it's kind of like I see it as a long-term thing. It's like, you know, year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, there's going to be, the work's going to keep coming out. It's just going to come out slow. And I think if I rushed this stuff and did it really quick, or if I brought in another artist to draw the book, people wouldn't be happy with that. They would be like, nah, it's like, this book is so me and Geoff, and it has to be just me and Geoff. And we have plans to help kind of fill in gaps between the story arcs. We're kind of discussing that now.
Right.
We'll announce some of that stuff at a later date. But we have ideas of how to keep this thing alive, so I can take the time that I need, and I can draw it at my pace that I want to, and put out the best work I can. And again, when when people read it, they really enjoy it, and that makes me feel good and makes me know I'm on the right track.
Yeah. I mean, it's really impressive thing to be able to, shape your career in that way and have time, like for many years, the comic book artist had, to keep drawing. That's what you have to do all the time. Jack Kirby worked himself,
Yeah,
into 15 pages a week was his
yeah,
quota at one point, and to be able to be like, no, I want to have more out of life, for a comic book creative, that's a tough thing to do. And then also to be sort of creatively fulfilled. Congrats on that. Like it's a good place to be.
it's something I've really thought about a lot,
Mhm.
especially recently. And there was a lot of things that have happened kind of in personal life and lives of friends and people that we knew where the tragedy kind of struck them. And it really makes you sit there and think, okay, what's really important in life? You know, the comic book fan, they want their book out monthly and they want it and they got to have it. But when you're reading a comic book, that's literally like a month of my life.
Mhm.
And it's like, but I have 3 kids and I have a wife and I want to spend time with them and I want to
Mhm.
do I coach hockey. I coach my kids' hockey team. And I love doing that. I love you only have your kids are only young for so like it goes so quick. And so it's like I want to be part of that. And I couldn't do that if I was working at DC, pumping out monthly books. I sacrificed a lot of time when I was going through those years, those the trenches years, and you're just
Right.
working like a dog 7 days a week and putting in 12, 13-hour days, working past supper time. I just didn't want to do that anymore. And a big part of me coming and doing Ghost Machine was I told Geoff, I said, I want to do that. I just want to draw at my own pace. If it takes me 2 months to draw an issue or 2.5 or 3 months, then so be it. And then the book comes out when it comes out. And I believe if the quality is there and if the story is there and the passion is there from the creators, I think it'll be a success. And it I feel like we've been proven right. The
Mhm.
sales on issue 7 were higher than on issue 6. So
Mhm.
even though we were gone for a while, the audience responded. And again, I think as we put out more and more of these issues and build more of this universe, we're going to attract more and more people to the book. And again, it's trying to find a good balance between the two things. And a lot of I also talked to a lot of comic creators and watched a lot of them, and I had a
Yeah.
lot of dinners with them as well. And you hear about, you know, so and so artist is getting divorced, and so artist they wish they spent more time with their kids, and so artist has all these health problems because they didn't take the time to exercise and work out and take care of their bodies.
Mhm.
And so I kind of said, okay, I got to learn from some of this, and
Mhm.
I have to be wise with the time that I have and have a balance in life. And I'm very content and very happy with where I'm at. And it took a long time for me to realize that. And but I'm producing my favorite stuff, and it's going really well. And I found that contentment, and I feel like I'm at that spot I've been always searching for, and and it feels good. It feels good to find that, and I feel like I can detach myself away from the again going back to the competitiveness, or I need to be number one, or
Mhm.
I need to be on the top DC book to feel fulfilled. It's like, no, I don't need that. I have my fulfillment in other things in life. I don't need it in being the number one Batman artist, but I am the number one Rook artist, and I created my own thing, and I own it, and I have creative power over it. And I believe, again, I see it as a long term thing, and I think uh, where we're going to go with the story and whatnot. I just have so much confidence in it. I really feel like we have something special, and I can't wait to get to some of these stories down the road and just keep building out this world and connecting with that audience and the readers and having that that relationship with people who are really into the book and reading it, and that's a special thing. It's very special.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the time. It's good to get to know you and hear the story, and I'm glad things are going well, and you've been able to get where you are. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh. I really appreciate it.
You're really welcome. I'll talk to you later.
All right, talk to you later.